All right, Aaron. So not the conversation I thought we'd be having at this time of the week after the semifinal matchup with TCU. The season is now officially over, and boy, I don't know. You never know how these games are going to turn out. It didn't turn out the way I thought it would turn out. I don't think anybody did. Not the fact that they lost, but in the manner in which they lost. It was just very weird. Yeah, you can blame maybe the extra time because this is just they were discombobulated from the start. Even saying that, they scored 45 points and they put up, a ton of offense when they needed to. So I can't really blame the offense and the fact that there was no Blake Corum, except that did hurt him a little bit, obviously, on the goal line. But still, no excuses there. The fact of the matter is they just weren't championship caliber. And I don't want to knock TCU for that. But look, if TCU gets their ass whooped on Monday night, we're going to sit here and it's going to feel a lot worse because we're going to know as Michigan fans, and they're going to know that they just really let this one get away.
No, you nailed it. They really made a lot of mistakes in the first half. I mean, the failed 4th down and 2 at the goal line, the 2
Weird
pick sixes
call,
JJ
by the way.
threw.
Weird call.
Yeah, it was very unlike what we'd seen all year. I mean, Michigan isn't, it's not like they've never run a reverse before. They have, but the fact that they've leaned on their running game and their strong offensive line all season long to get into that situation where all you need is 2 yards for a touchdown, and not hand the ball off to your running back.
Or let J.J. McCarthy move and do something.
Right. Exactly. It's quarterback sneak. And you could say the same thing about the
fumble,
the run for the Khalil Mullings at the 1 yard line. Like, you could have just pushed JJ into the end zone, right? And he probably would have.
You know what's funny though is that on his touchdown later in the game, it looks so easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's the way it should have looked. The first one ended off. The wall pushes everybody. Yeah. It's an easy touch. That's what they thought was going to happen. So I don't want to blame them for that because the second one looks so easy. That's what should have happened the first time around. So anyway,
and it's easy to obviously look back and say, well, if this would have happened, this would have happened. I mean, how often they fumble on the goal line? It really happened. Yeah. So it was a very weird game. Like you said, it wasn't something we expected. I think most of us covering this game, including, I can speak for the TCU writers too, many of them had Michigan winning this game, and some, but handily. I think many expected TCU to kind of wilt on the big stage just because they'd never been here. They had a lot of guys, and their head coach Sonny Dykes said that. Not only is this the first time in the playoff stage, but a lot of their team, this is the first time ever playing in a bowl game. That's how young and just inexperienced some of these guys are. So it was a very weird game. It was one where I think Michigan was there to take it. They could have won the game still, but at the end they just made too many mistakes. And when you get to this point and this level, when you turn the ball over that much, it's going to come back to burn you, and it did.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the thing starting at the beginning, the thing that really didn't make any sense for me, running a reverse, is this: if you go for it, okay. Here's the deal. Even the announcers were saying it. Anytime you go for it, especially early in the game, part of the reason you go for it is because if you don't get it, the opposition is right there at the goal line. And you're going to have an opportunity for your defense to get the ball right back, good field, and maybe you could score a touchdown anyway. But they run a reverse and lose like 10 yards or 8 yards, which puts them completely out of the opportunity to stuff them at the goal line, which is why I can't imagine how that could get past 2 offensive coordinators and a head coach. That they just don't come on. So that was the first thing that bothered me. And then the obvious pick sixes were really bad. To have multiple pick sixes in a game is just, you can't. It's amazing they almost had an opportunity to win that game when you give up 2 touchdowns on offense and 2 touchdowns at the goal line. I mean, that's 28 points, and they still had the ball with a chance to win the game at the end.
Yeah, it just goes to show. I mean, if you look at the stat sheet too, Michigan won total yards. They had more first downs. They still had, they had the ball longer. They controlled time of possession. It was just those mistakes, those turnovers, those easy points for TCU that ended up being the difference.
Yeah,
and that's kind of it. I mean, Michigan's defense wasn't great.
I don't know what was up with that. That was the thing that was real surprising. I mean, that they got one receiver, and they want to run the football. So why couldn't you stop that? What was up? Why do you when you talk to the people after the game or when you were watching the game unfold, what was going on? What happened? Why couldn't they stop their running game?
I think part of it was the four receiver sets and TCU just kind of wanting to throw the ball a lot. I think it spread Michigan's defense out a
Okay.
little bit more than they're used to. And I think it opened up some running lanes for TCU's running attack. I mean, if you look at the box score and watch the game, they weren't just getting gashed by TCU's top running back Kendry Miller. He went out short early with an ankle injury. It was their backup. Their backup had a really good game. So that just goes to show. That tells me that there were running lanes there. TCU took advantage, and it was a result of how TCU played offensively. This game quickly devolved into a track meet, and that's kind of what TCU wants to do. That's how they want to play. When Michigan went down 21-3, 21-6 at halftime, they were forced to throw the ball to try and catch up. And, that's obviously not one of their strengths. And you saw that at times. I mean, there was a point there, especially early in the third quarter, Michigan was really struggling to throw the ball. You could tell they were trying to throw the ball, but TCU was dropping six guys back, and there was no one open. There was no one to throw to. Now, you mentioned JJ's legs, and they finally got that going toward the end of the third quarter, and that's kind of when all the scoring picked up and everything else. And it certainly opened things up for Michigan's offense. But by that point, they were still trying to play catch up, and you're playing the type of ball TCU wants to. So I don't know. I think Michigan got behind early on their own accord, their mistake, and it turned into TCU's type of game, and that's not what Michigan was designed to do or play or even try and play and come back from.
And I still think they were just one play away from winning the game, and that was when they had all the momentum. They had TCU in third and long. They put on the blitz, and for some godforsaken reason, they allowed the best player on the entire football field to catch a wide open pass and to go one-on-one for a touchdown. I mean, he makes one guy miss, and it's a touchdown. Now, if we make that stop, get the ball back with all that momentum, I mean, Michigan's going to win the game. I don't think there's any doubt about it. But it just broke our backs again. And then we scored another touchdown to make it close, but then it was just, how often can we keep doing this? And they just couldn't do it anymore.
No, and they had momentum at that point, and you're right. I think if they'd gotten to the quarterback or quick enough, that play doesn't happen. But even with the play evolving as it did, I mean, you can't leave Quentin Johnson that open. I mean, there was no one there.
Just put a guy on him.
There was a blown assignment. Someone wasn't paying attention. I don't know what the story was, but yeah, I mean, you can't let someone like that wide open, and they paid for it. So it was. I don't know. Michigan almost needed to play a perfect second half to try and come back and win that game, and they played very well. I mean, I think they outplayed TCU in the second half, but it wasn't enough, and the hole was too big in the first half, and by the end of it, they just couldn't dig themselves out.
And what really kind of put a cement in the performance was the final drive, not the final play, but the final drive, because I had been watching these bowl games the last few days leading up into this game, and there must have been 2 or 3 games. I know one was the Pittsburgh game, one I forget the other one was a touchdown drive, but they were where the teams were in the same spot Michigan was. Under a minute left, they got the ball, but they're able to just move down the field, kick a field goal, score a touchdown, win the game. What do? 4 now, and it was ugly. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even like, oh, we were just this close. It was the worst looking last 4. It was just terrible. It was like the worst drive of their season. And it's like, guys, I mean, and I don't know if and this goes to JJ McCarthy. And he had no question, he played his guts out. Okay. A lot of other quarterbacks would have wilted after those 2 pick sixes, even the first one. He showed a lot, and I hope it means that he's going to grow up to be a Heisman Trophy caliber player because of it next season. But the man he felt the pressure. And when you open your mouth the way he's done, talk about job's not over, we're going to win this, but you have to back it up.
Stuff.
And he didn't. And let that be a lesson to JJ. Keep your mouth closed.
It's funny, too, because he's done a good job, it seems like, most of the year of not saying much. without he said stuff without saying much, and yet after the Big Ten championship game, I remember in the team hotel and the college football playoff announcement thing or whatever. That's when he first said, we're going to smash them, blah blah blah. And it was a little bit surprising hearing it coming out of his mouth, but you could tell this team was. I mean, they were confident.
Sure.
They thought,
I
they
have no
thought they'd get
problem
at
with it, but
least
you got to back it up.
right, right. And going back to that final drive, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It was very much Michigan's. I don't want to say weakness, but they're not known for throwing the football. And TCU is a team designed to defend the pass. So Michigan, that final drive, they had to throw the ball. They had to move down quickly, and it didn't work. I mean, TCU's,
I mean, it was awful. I mean, he threw the one pass at the
not only
sideline for
that, but
5 yards that was incomplete. I mean, what were you looking to accomplish there, JJ? Even if he caught the
not only
ball, that's
that, but
5 yards.
Michigan Michigan never been in that position this year. They've never had to win the game on a final drive. I
Except
mean,
the Illinois game,
close.
but that was not the final
Yeah,
drive. Yes.
right. It wasn't like back against the wall, final minute, you're down. They haven't been in that situation. So I think in a way, they're in an
Yeah.
unfamiliar. I mean, all game they're
Sure.
unfamiliar
Yeah.
territory. They reacted relatively well. I mean, they made a game out of it. I
Sure.
was half expecting it to end up being a blowout. So they made
You're
it
right.
competitive, but again, it just wasn't enough.
That's why I'm
At first,
hoping that this will help them for next season.
Mhm.
All right. Now you know what to
Yeah.
do, what not to do. Because now you've been at both spots. Now you've been an
Mhm.
underdog. Now you've been there again and as the favorite. So I don't want to hear nothing. I mean, just do it. All
Right.
right. If you're in that spot again, just get the job done. And like I said, I hope this makes JJ McCarthy a special player because I think he can become that player. He needs to do it next year. He's ready to do it. He's got the goods now. Let's see him go out there, like I said, and have a Heisman caliber type of season, which I think it's in him.
I do too. I mean, he had last year to kind of get his feet wet and dip his toe in the water, and this year he's finally handed the keys to the car, and he played relatively well in an offense that wasn't designed to throw. So I'm really curious to see where they go next year. Are they going to continue to lean on the running game? Are they going
Probably.
to evolve a little bit and try and throw the ball
That
more
would be
with him?
nice. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know. It seems to me that they're setting up for that, but obviously I'm not the one calling plays or the one designing the offense. So we'll
And
see.
the big question is Corum and what he is going to do. So, any word on when we're going to find out?
No, I mean the declaration date's coming up for the NFL draft. I think was it January 16th or
Correct.
middle of
Yep.
this month. So he said a few weeks back that he was 50-50. I will say I was on the field before the game on Saturday, and he had crutches on. He was limping. He had a cast on his left leg, but he was walking around the stadium signing autographs for fans. And that was the question he kept getting. You coming back? You coming back? Obviously, and he said then he hasn't made his mind up yet. He's not sure yet. We'll see. So I don't know. Normally, if he wasn't hurt and he'd play the entire year, there's no doubt he'd leave. I think there's no question about it. Now, you wonder if that's going to impact, his ability at the NFL Combine, if he can do anything, and I'm sure it's going to hit his stock a
A
little
little
bit.
bit.
Yeah, so I don't know. And it probably will go into, it's probably going to play into, who else is coming back on the Michigan offense. Will Jim Harbaugh be there next year? There's a lot of things that play here, I think, in this decision.
Yeah. And I think Dave Syvertson, we've already started our draft content for the draft. And Dave has Blake going I think he has him as around, I think it was a fifth round. I believe so. I'll have to double check that. But yeah,
That sounds about
yeah.
right.
And I think that it could be better if he is healthier and he completes the
Yes.
full season. And I could see him being more of a third, fourth round kind of guy.
Hmm.
But
And that's where the combine comes in, right? Like, how many times have we heard stories of guys, like you said, fourth or fifth round draft grade? They go to the combine, interview well, measure well, work out well, and it boosts them a round or two. And you find some teams that really like them. So, and you wonder how much the injury is going to impact his ability to do anything in Indianapolis, assuming he decides to go.
yes, that is. And then we mentioned Harbaugh. All right, a couple of thoughts on Harbaugh before I let you go, and that is I had mentioned on one of the earlier shows how I was one of the few outspoken backers because a lot of the media. I know you had mentioned that a lot of really diehard fans, and I know there are a lot of fans who really do and have stuck with Harbaugh and maybe a vocal minority kind of made it sound like it was more fans than not that were like, just we don't care, or he can go, he can, let's find a new coach, and then he gets over that. So I'm with him the whole way, but I was like, okay, like most fans though that even were with him, something's got to change, and it did. And when he made the changes, and we talked about that, great. He's our guy again. He's doing what he should have been doing in the first place. He corrected his mistakes. Great. This is going to be awesome. And now 2 years, it's going to be great. It's only going to get better. And all along through all of the NFL, Jim Harbaugh, every year kind of deal, he's not going anywhere. I'm so sick of hearing this stuff. He's not leaving because he hasn't accomplished anything at Michigan. And first things first. First, he's got to accomplish something. And even if he does, I don't know if he'd leave, but we'll see. First things first, he has to, and I don't mean get to a playoff. I mean win a championship. He's got to get this team, this program back to greatness. And we're not at that point yet. But I'm getting a little tired of this every single offseason. And I know a lot of the fans are feeling the same way. And I'm not saying that he's saying anything wrong, because you said this on the podcast about, hey, look, yeah, he left it open a little bit. You don't know what the future is going to be like. Okay. And I agree. I mean, what else can the man say is, I'm not going anywhere, but hey, look, you don't know what the future is going to be like. I think that's a true statement. I get that. But it's still getting sickening. It's still getting annoying. And it's like, I don't know what else he could do or should do. Except every time one of these situations come out, he needs to come out and say, I'm not going anywhere. And if he doesn't say I'm not going anywhere, then that leads us to believe that he is talking to people and he might leave.
Yeah, you nailed it. And I think you embody the frustration of a lot of the fan base. I mean, they're sick of it too. It seems like it's been every year, especially the last couple of years. And I think for a while during his early days at Michigan, he made a decent job. He would oftentimes quickly kind of shoot those things down, whether it was through the media or he'd send a letter out or whatever the case may be. That hasn't been the case the last couple of years, and you saw what happened last year. There was genuine interest in going to the NFL to the point where he actually physically interviewed with the Minnesota Vikings. So it's hard to say at this point what he's thinking. You can go back to his comments last month, and while he did say he would be back enthusiastically coaching Michigan in 2023, the same breath he left the door open, as you said, no man knows the future. So I think at that point he planned on being there. I think he was, euphoric in the moment. They again just won a Big Ten championship, and they were going to the playoff and everything else. But I think at the end of the day, he wants to coach the NFL again. He said that last year after the Vikings interview, and if the right opportunity opens up, I think he's going to go.
I think you're right.
So it's going to come down to, I think, where he feels valued the most. I don't think he necessarily wants to go through the public rigmarole of an interview again like he did last year with the Vikings. I think he's waiting on ownership to call him and say, hey, Jim, we want you. We know what you can do. We've seen what you can do. We want you to be the head coach. You're going to be in charge of
everything.
Player personnel.
Yes. You're the keys to the engine.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's when he would go. It's got to be the right situation for him. And whether I don't know exactly what happened last year in Minneapolis. I don't know if that was just Minnesota realizing, hey, we don't want Jim as the guy, or Jim realizing this isn't the situation for me. But he's got to be in the right spot. So I don't know. I mean, he's been linked to 2 jobs now, or at least he's been contacted by 2 different NFL organizations, the Panthers and the Broncos. I expect the Colts to put their hat.
I would imagine the Colts might even be because he's got ties to the organization.
Exactly.
And I could see Irsay being that type of guy. But I think the hard part is they've got a very good general manager. And I don't anticipate that guy's going anywhere. So that would be that. There would have to be some like simpatico kind of relationship there that Harbaugh feels real comfortable with.
Yeah. Yep. So I don't know. I would put it. This feels very similar to last offseason, where there are a lot of rumors going around. People didn't know if he was going to go or stay, and it just very much feels like that. The right situation when the NFL pops up, he's going to go. He's made no bones. He wants to go and try to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And part of me wonders too if he thinks maybe he's plateaued at Michigan. Maybe he thinks he can't get any higher. If you remember last year in the kind of the aftermath of them losing the semifinal and the interview with the Vikings, he kind of openly wondered what it would take to go from that that semifinal round in the playoff to winning it all. So part of me wonders if he's thinking that he thinks he can't get any higher. So I don't know.
After this year, I think it's just more. If anything, it should have, given him confidence that he could win a championship with this program, because they were better than TCU. They should have not. Nobody predicted that they were going to be that sloppy, so they should have played in the national championship game. And Ohio State nearly beat the team that they would be playing. So I don't think he should feel like that. And I could see how he would feel that going into the season, because until this season unfolded, things never really feel this open before. There was always a dominant Clemson, a dominant Alabama, even a dominant Georgia. But Georgia's not dominant. Alabama slipped up. Nobody expected that. Ohio State, even Michigan's taking care of them. So I think that opening now is clearly there. Yeah, I could do this. I think we can do this now. And then the playoffs come in a couple of years.
Right. Or you could play devil's advocate and say, well, it was there for the taking this year.
And we still couldn't get
like
it
you
done.
said, they should have beaten TCU. Yeah. They could have won the national championship, and they fell on their face.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's you
don't know
what
he's thinking.
No, you don't, and that's the thing. No one really knows.
I will say this though, and I'm going to be okay if he leaves after setting us up nicely. He hasn't set us up the way that I would have expected him to if he leaves. Again, I expected him to leave only if we won a championship. If he were to leave now and leaves in this note, the problem that I'm wondering about is that even though the program is in much better shape than when he took over, like you guys were throwing some names around, some assistant coaches, about if they stay in-house. Those guys have no experience as being a head coach. And I don't know. He'd have to just feel real confident in maybe whoever he believes is going to be the guy that's going to take over the program. Because if he were to leave Michigan and put him in a situation where they have no idea who the next head coach is going to be, only, Jim recommends a couple of these guys, and they're okay. But again, he better be right. Because if he just leaves the program off to a couple of inexperienced guys, and a year later, 2 years later, it's back to where we were when he took over the program, then he did us no favors.
Right. And a couple of names we brought up, I mean, they're internal candidates, Sharon Moore and Mike Hart. You wonder, too, if Jim were to leave the NFL, maybe he'd bring those guys with him.
Quite possible.
So you don't know you don't even know they're going to be here. But I will say this. I mean, Jim has spoken highly of Sharon Moore. He said a month ago that he thought he could be a head coach. He's ready to be one. So that, I don't know if there were rumors that Sharon was being contacted for other head coaching jobs. So you wonder if the inexperience would play a factor. I mean, it comes down to, right at the end of the day, do you want continuity or do you want to blow this thing up? Because if you bring in a new outside guy, the assistant coaches are likely going to be wiped out. We all know how that works. Those coaches come in and bring their own guys. And then you wonder about blowing up the continuity of the roster, the recruiting, and everything else. Because if there is that outside candidate, person you bring in, they're going to want to do it their own way, and they're going to want their own system and offense and defense. And so I don't know. It would come down to what athletic director Warren Manuel thinks is best and where he wants the program to be.
What do you think?
I think from a stability standpoint, I think Michigan's in a good spot. As you mentioned, Jim has left the program, and again, he hasn't left yet, but he has the program in a better spot than when he found it. So I think there's momentum there. The players have bought in. The culture is, I think, improved. Now, look, that's not to say if they were to promote an internal candidate that every player on the roster is going to stay. Some guys may leave, you know, but I would think they would be able to keep most of them, and I think they would be, another competitive team they would compete for another Big Ten championship and playoff spot next year. And as you said, the expanded playoff is coming, so it'll be a little bit easier in the future for Michigan to get in.
Oh yeah, you would think that if they don't get into the playoffs every year, that's a major disappointment.
Right.
Because they could get in with 2 losses.
Right, exactly, and they probably wouldn't have to beat Ohio State every year.
Nope.
So it'd be a lot easier. So I think in that way, I think from a stability standpoint, Michigan's in a very good spot. Now, that's not to say it will stay that way if they were to, promote within and everything else. Obviously, time will tell on that mark. But I lean toward Michigan promoting. There's been a lot of talk about Mike Hart in recent years and just how they think he's ready. I mean, he was an associate head coach in Indiana, so the talk is he's kind of been being prepared for that. He's been prepped for that for a couple of years now. So I don't know.
So you really don't even know if it would be more a Hart.
Right. Maybe it's someone else. I don't know. But those are the two guys I would lean toward. I lean more toward, if Jim were to leave, I lean toward Michigan promoting from within. And that's another thing too. If they were to go out and get an outside candidate, who do you go towards? Do you try and lure a big name, in which point you have to pay, have to pay over the top, which is something Michigan has shown that they don't like doing, or they go and get a new up and comer guy, and maybe a lower level program who's doing very well to give him the keys to this brand new nice car. And in a way, you're taking a risk there, especially someone who isn't familiar with the Big Ten or the program. So it's an interesting predicament. It would be an interesting predicament. Again, we're not saying Jim's leaving at this point, but I don't know.
One that we want to go down. We don't want to really go down that road, but at least that's why I wanted to talk about it in case it happens, because it definitely could happen. Like I'm just taking a look at some of the, because when some of the rumors started to swirl, there were some coaching candidates that still haven't had jobs. But I agree. I mean, Campbell's probably the biggest name still. Even I know he hasn't performed well the last couple of years record-wise, but it's Iowa State. I mean, he doesn't get great recruits there. So I don't think anybody would mind. Michigan would not mind. They wouldn't hold it past, you didn't coach well the last couple of years. You're not good enough for Michigan football. That wouldn't be the case. But I agree with you. I think that staying in-house, even if you just do it like in short term, give that person a 2-year contract, you're basically giving him a year. Let's see what he does. I'm going to give him a year. Yeah. Let's see if he could ride this momentum positively, and if he does, then okay, then maybe we'll give him an extension after the year. But if it's a complete disaster, if it looks like that was the wrong way to go, then you've got a lot of time now to think about a more experienced coach to come into the program. So I agree with you. All right, so let's hope that's not the case. I don't want to think about that. I know we have to. But that's just...
I know for my workload, I don't have to think about that.
That is true, too. Boy, wow. What kind of impact that could be. Just look at the Hoops team. I mean, they're competitive, but it just goes to show you. I mean, we all loved Bayline, and it's just... I mean, it felt like... I mean, as a Rutgers guy, too, as I mentioned, because I'm from New Jersey, it just destroyed the football program when Shauna left. And look how long it's taken him to kind of get back to it. And I know... They have a guy Joan Howard, who's done a nice job, and he can bring in big recruits, but Bayline never really did that, and he won because he brought in a certain type of player, defensive coach, great X's and O's coach.
And they develop guys, too.
Yeah, sort of like Steve Peichel, what he's doing at Rutgers. I'm going to find my guys, not going to be top star guys, and it worked, and became so close a couple of times. And when he left, it was just so painful because like when Shiano left, it was like, well, what are you doing? Because he left and he was gone for like 2 years and it was a failure. And in Bayline, 1 year, it's a failure. And you just ruined what you could have been 15, 20 years of staying at a program and building it just because you wanted to go to the NFL or you wanted to go to the NBA, so not that I think Harbaugh would fail. I think because he's already succeeded at the NFL. So, but I just hope if he leaves, I just don't want to go back to where things were because I'm just starting to get excited now about what could be with this football program, especially with the playoff system coming up. So, anyway,
I think that's how a lot of the fans think too. I mean, they're this close, right?
We're this close. We can touch it. We can feel it. Yes. Back-to-back wins over the Buckeyes. Yeah. Well, at least Jake Moody didn't miss a field goal late in the game. That would have been worse.
Yeah.
That I feel I don't feel bad, I should say, for the way Ohio State lost to Georgia, but that would have been a lot worse. But again, hey, by the way, there you go. Ohio State had the ball. What was it? Minute? How much time did they have? Under a minute.
Yeah, it was, I think 50 seconds or something.
Moved right into field position, but then they got conservative. But if they needed a touchdown, maybe they would have scored one. That's why it was.
I couldn't understand. I thought they needed another 15 yards just, for the field goal kicker, just to, give them a little bit of breathing room. But
obviously, and talk about pressure. Come on. When you miss that bad, he couldn't handle the pressure. And you just never know. And that's, look, hey, I'm not going to say anything because JJ couldn't handle the pressure when we had the ball with under a minute left as well. We'll see how it all unfolds. I hope we don't have any reason to talk in a few weeks because if Jim Harbaugh does leave, when do you think it could? When would you say it would happen?
Probably next couple of weeks.
Oh, within the next couple of weeks. So by no
yeah,
later than the
maybe.
end of the month.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I mean, you got to remember a lot of these interviews don't begin. Coaching interviews don't begin until after the season concludes. So, in the NFL season's what final weeks
Final
this
week.
weekend. So I think interviews will probably start cranking up next week.
Okay.
So I think next 2 weeks will probably be key. We'll have a better idea where things stand, and then if we don't hear much, by the end of January, I think it's safe to assume he'll be back.
Well, we'll
Because
definitely.
if you remember, he interviewed with the Vikings last year. I think it was the first week of February.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true.
So it might drag on a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so we'll be checking. That's good for you, though. We'll be checking constantly over at mlive.com/Wolverines. And, of course, the podcast. How often will you be doing the podcast at this time of year?
Yeah, we do it a couple times a week
Still,
at least,
okay.
As big things happen or as news develops.
And that's football and hoops?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we do both.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, I appreciate it as always. It's been a great first season talking to you, covering Michigan Wolverines football, and hopefully we'll be able to do this more so in 2023. And hey, you know what? Maybe next year when we talk, it'll be a championship season kind of deal. So appreciate it. We'll be checking you out specifically with all the Harbaugh news, and look forward to talking to you again at some point. And I hope it won't be for a few more months. If you know what I mean.
It's been, yes, it's been
Thanks,
fun.
Aaron.